The storm came without warning. Thalrex crouched behind a cluster of black rocks, his claws digging into the volcanic soil. Rain hammered against his armored scales, each drop feeling like a tiny hammer. The young Krell was only 12 cycles old, barely tall enough to reach his father's chest, but already he carried the weight of expectation on his shoulders. This was the trial. Every young Krell had to survive 3 days alone in the wilderness of Vakros Prime. No weapons. No communicators. Only instinct and training. Thalrex had been so proud when his father, War Chief Draknor, had painted the hunting marks on his face that morning. Now covered in mud and shivering despite his thick hide, that pride felt distant. Thunder split the sky. Lightning revealed the landscape in brief, terrifying flashes. Thalrex moved carefully along the ridge, remembering Velshara's instructions. The head instructor had been clear. Stay on high ground during storms. Find shelter. Wait it out. Simple rules that had kept Krell cubs alive for thousands of years. But the ground beneath his feet had other plans. The mud gave way suddenly. One moment Thalrex was stepping forward, the next he was sliding. His claws scraped uselessly against wet stone. He tried to roar, to call for help, but water filled his mouth. The world became a chaotic tumble of rock and rain and darkness. He hit something hard, then something harder. Pain exploded through his left shoulder. His right leg twisted at a wrong angle. The tracking beacon on his chest, the small device that would help the instructors find him if something went wrong, cracked with a sound like breaking bones. Then everything went black. When Thalrex woke, the storm had passed. Pale sunlight filtered through the canyon walls high above. He tried to move and gasped. His shoulder screamed with pain. His leg wouldn't support his weight. The beacon on his chest was dark, its pieces scattered around him. Fear gripped him then. Real fear, not the nervous excitement of the trial. He was hurt. He was alone, and nobody knew where he was. Far above, on the training grounds command platform, Velshara studied the displays with growing concern. 17 young Krell had entered the trial. 16 beacons still pulsed with steady life signs. One had gone dark. She knew which one before she even checked the identification code. Thalrex, son of Draknor. Of course it would be the War Chief's cub. These things always happened at the worst possible time. Send retrieval teams to his last known location, she ordered. Her voice was steady, but her tail twitched with anxiety. Now, the search began within the hour. Krell warriors spread through the wilderness, their thermal vision scanning for any sign of the missing cub. They found the ridge where he had been. They found the mudslide. They found pieces of his tracking beacon at the bottom of a ravine. But they did not find Thalrex. 3 days passed. Then 4. The search expanded, covering hundreds of square kilometers. Draknor himself arrived on the 5th day, his personal warship casting a shadow over the training grounds. He was a massive Krell, even by their standards, his scales dark as space itself, his eyes burning with barely contained fury. My son, he said quietly to Velshara. Too quietly. The kind of quiet that came before violence. Where is my son? We are searching, War Chief. Every warrior available is not enough. Draknor's claws extended. If he is dead, someone will answer for it. If he was taken, someone will beg for death before I grant it. Find him. Velshara bowed her head. There was nothing else to say. The entire Krell military apparatus was now focused on finding one small cub. Satellites repositioned, additional troops deployed. The humans on the nearby moon station had been warned to stay clear of the search zones. The message was clear. The Krell were not asking permission. They were taking what they needed. On Vakros Prime's moon, Lieutenant Jiwan read the Krell warning message for the 3rd time. She was a compact woman with short black hair and tired eyes. 3 years leading this survey team had taught her that the Krell didn't make idle threats. They're expanding the search grid again, Minji said from the communications station. The young officer looked worried. At this rate, they'll be in our survey zones by tomorrow. Let them, Jiwan replied. We're not going to start an incident over territorial boundaries. Not when a child is missing. Hyunwoo looked up from his research console. He was tall and thin, with glasses that he constantly pushed up his nose. Has anyone considered that the cub might have traveled further than they think? Young animals, when injured and scared, sometimes move in unexpected directions. The Krell have thermal satellites, Kyungsoo pointed out. The security specialist was cleaning his rifle, a habit that made Jiwan nervous. If the cub was alive and moving, they'd have found him by now. Unless he's somewhere they're not looking, Hyunwoo insisted. Our survey data shows cave systems in the eastern ridges. Deep ones. Thermal imaging wouldn't penetrate that far underground. Ji-won considered this. The eastern ridges were technically in the restricted zone, but only barely. If there was even a chance the cub had made it that far, "It's not our problem," Minji said firmly. "We're scientists, not rescue workers. And interfering with a Krell warrior trial is punishable by death. Their law, not ours. Their law also says that honor demands protecting the helpless," Hyunwoo argued. "I've read their codes. They're not monsters even if they act like it sometimes." The room fell silent. Everyone knew the real issue. The peace treaty between humans and the Krell Dominion was barely 5 years old. Before that, there had been border skirmishes, misunderstandings that ended in bloodshed, a constant tension that could easily spark into war. Nobody wanted to be responsible for reigniting that conflict, but nobody wanted to let a child die either. Ji-won made her decision. "Hyunwoo, pull up the geological surveys of the eastern ridges. Kyungsoo, prep a shuttle for a reconnaissance run, low-altitude passive sensors only. We're just taking a look." "Ji-won," Minji started. "Log it as routine survey work," Ji-won interrupted. "Because that's what it is. We're not searching for the Krell cub. We're not interfering with their trial. We're just doing our jobs, and if we happen to notice something unusual, well, that's what surveys are for." The logic was thin and they all knew it. But sometimes thin logic was better than no logic at all. 3 hours later, Ji-won and Hyunwoo were in a shuttle, skimming over the eastern ridges. The landscape below was harsh and beautiful, all sharp rocks and deep shadows. Hyunwoo monitored the sensors, his eyes fixed on the display. "There," he said suddenly. "Thermal signature. Small, but definitely there. In that cave entrance, see?" Ji-won brought the shuttle around. The cave mouth was barely visible, hidden behind fallen rocks. But the sensors didn't lie. Something warm was inside. "Could be any number of things," Ji-won said, but her hands were already guiding the shuttle down. "Native fauna. Geological activity. Could be," Hyunwoo agreed. They both knew it wasn't. The shuttle landed on a flat area near the cave. They grabbed emergency supplies, medical kits, water. If it was the Krell cub and if he was alive, he would need help. The cave was dark and smelled of damp stone. Their lights cut through the blackness, revealing smooth walls worn by ancient water. 50 meters in, they found him. Thalrex lay against the back wall of the cave, barely breathing. His scales were dull, his eyes closed. The injury to his shoulder had become infected, the flesh around it swollen and discolored. He had managed to drag himself this far, following some instinct to find shelter, but he couldn't go any further. Hyunwoo knelt beside the small Krell, checking vital signs. "He's alive, barely. Dehydrated, infected wound, possible broken bones. We need to get him stabilized." Ji-won stood at the cave entrance looking out at the alien sky. She knew what this meant. The moment they touched this cub, the moment they interfered, they crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But looking back at the small, broken form in the darkness, she knew there was never really a choice. "Do it," she said. "Save him." The first thing Hyunwoo did was scan the cub with their medical scanner. The device hummed softly, analyzing Krell biology that was both familiar and alien. The results made him wince. Fractured leg, dislocated shoulder, severe dehydration, and infection spreading from the shoulder wound, he reported. "If we don't treat the infection soon, it will reach his bloodstream. After that?" He didn't need to finish the sentence. Ji-won knelt on the other side of the small Krell. Up close, she could see how young he really was. Despite being larger than a human child, there was something vulnerable about him. His claws were still short and blunt. His scales hadn't fully hardened into the armor plating that made adult Krell nearly invincible. "Can you help him here, or do we need to move him to the shuttle?" Hyunwoo was already opening the medical kit. "Moving him could make the injuries worse. We'll stabilize him here, then decide." He pulled out antibiotics, fluid packets, and a portable medical unit. "This is designed for humans, but Krell biology is close enough. I think." "You think?" "I'm a xenobiologist, not a doctor," Hyunwoo reminded her. "But I've studied their physiology. The important systems work the same way as ours. He needs fluids, antibiotics, and proper wound care. That much I'm sure about." He started with the infection. The wound on Thalrex's shoulder was ugly, filled with dirt and debris from his fall. Hyunwoo cleaned it carefully, his movements gentle despite the urgency. He applied antibiotic gel, then wrapped it in sterile bandages. Next came the fluids. He inserted an IV line into Thalrex's arm, taping it carefully in place. The fluid bag hung from a portable stand, dripping life-saving liquid into the cub's veins. "Now we wait," Hyunwoo said, sitting back. "His body needs time to respond to the treatment." Ji-won contacted the shuttle remotely, instructing it to hold position. Then she contacted Minji back at the base station. "We found something," she said carefully. "Native fauna injured. We're providing medical assistance." There was a long pause. Minji wasn't stupid. She knew exactly what native fauna meant. "Understood. Be advised, Krell search patterns are moving east. They'll be in your area within 12 hours. Acknowledged. We'll be done before then." Another pause. "Ji-won, be careful." The connection ended. Ji-won looked at Hyunwoo, who was monitoring Thalrex's vital signs. "Can we move him in 12 hours? "Maybe, if his body responds well to the treatment." Hyunwoo adjusted the IV drip. "But honestly, I don't know if moving him is the right choice anyway. We need to contact the Krell, tell them we found their cub, and admit we interfered with a warrior trial. That's a death sentence. Letting him die because we're afraid is worse." Ji-won had no answer for that. She stood and walked to the cave entrance, looking out at the landscape. The sun was setting, painting the rocks in shades of red and gold. Beautiful and deadly, like everything on this planet. Behind her, she heard a sound. A low growl, barely audible. Thalrex was waking up. The young Krell's eyes opened slowly. His vision was blurry at first, shapes and shadows without meaning. Then the world came into focus and he saw something that made his blood freeze. Humans. 2 of them, close enough to touch. The smaller one, a female, stood near the cave entrance. The taller one, a male, sat right beside him with some kind of device in his hands. Thalrex tried to move, to attack, to defend himself. Pain stopped him immediately. His shoulder screamed. His leg wouldn't respond. He managed only a weak growl, a pathetic sound that shamed him. The male human raised his hands, showing empty palms. He said something in that strange human language, soft sounds that meant nothing to Thalrex. But the tone was gentle, not threatening. Thalrex's training kicked in. Assess the situation. These were humans, the species his people had fought wars against. Humans were weak, soft, without natural weapons or armor. They were prey pretending to be predators, but these humans weren't attacking him. They weren't running away either. They were just there, watching him with curious eyes. The male human reached out slowly. Thalrex tried to pull away but couldn't. The human's hand touched his forehead, checking for fever, perhaps. The touch was warm and surprisingly gentle. "Easy," the human said. And somehow Thalrex understood the meaning, if not the words. "You're hurt. We're helping." Thalrex looked down at himself. He saw the bandages on his shoulder, clean and white. He saw the tube in his arm connected to a clear bag of liquid. He saw his leg, carefully splinted and wrapped. Helping. The humans were helping him. It made no sense. In Krell society, showing weakness meant death or demotion. The strong dominated the weak. That was the natural order. If a cub couldn't survive the trial, then the cub didn't deserve to survive. But these humans hadn't left him to die. They had found him, treated his wounds, given him medicine. Why? The female human approached, carrying a container of water. She knelt beside him, moving slowly like someone approaching a dangerous animal. She was right to be cautious. Even injured, Thalrex could probably hurt her badly if he tried. But he didn't try. He was too weak, too confused, too thirsty. She held the container to his mouth. "Drink," she said. Thalrex drank. The water was cool and clean, the best thing he had ever tasted. He drank until the container was empty, then lay back, exhausted from even that small effort. "Ji-won," the male human said, gesturing to himself. Then he pointed to the female. "Hyunwoo." Names, they were giving him their names. "Thalrex," he managed to say, his voice rough and painful. Speaking Korean was difficult with his throat so dry, but he had learned some human language during diplomatic briefings. "My name?" "Thalrex," Hyunwoo smiled. It was a strange expression, showing teeth, but somehow Thalrex understood it wasn't a threat. "Thalrex, good, rest now. You're safe. Safe. With humans." The idea was absurd. But as exhaustion pulled him back down into darkness, Thalrex found himself believing it. Hours passed. The sun set completely and darkness filled the cave. Hyunwoo set up small lights that cast a soft glow. He checked Thalrex's vital signs regularly, adjusting the IV drip, changing bandages, making sure the infection was responding to treatment. Ji-won sat near the cave entrance, keeping watch. The Krell search parties were getting closer. She could see their aircraft in the distance, bright lights cutting through the night sky. "We're running out of time," she said quietly. Hyunwoo nodded. "His fever is down. The infection is responding to antibiotics, but he's still too weak to move safely. Then we'll have to defend our position when they arrive." "Against the Krell military?" "Ji-won, we're scientists with one security officer back at the base. We can't fight them." "We don't have to fight. We just have to explain." Ji-won turned to look at the sleeping cub. "We found an injured child and we helped him. That's not an act of war. That's basic decency. The Krell don't see it that way. We interfered with a sacred trial. We contaminated their warrior culture with human weakness. Then their culture is wrong," Ji-won said firmly. "And someone needs to tell them that." Hyunwoo laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You want to lecture the Krell Dominion on morality? That's how we start another war. Maybe, or maybe it's how we finally achieve real peace." Ji-won stood and stretched. "The treaty we have now is just fear disguised as friendship. Both sides are too afraid to fight again, so we pretend to get along. But real peace requires understanding. It requires seeing each other as people, not just potential enemies." She walked over to where Thalrex slept. The cub looked peaceful now, his breathing steady and deep. He's just a child. When his father finds him here, safe and cared for, maybe he'll understand that humans aren't the enemy. Maybe this one act of kindness will mean something. "Or maybe he'll kill us for dishonoring his son," Hyunwoo said. But he didn't sound convinced by his own argument anymore. They settled in for a long night. Hyunwoo prepared a simple meal from their emergency rations. Ji-won started a small fire near the cave entrance using a portable heating unit. The flames danced in the darkness, warm and comforting. Thalrex woke again near midnight. He watched the humans move around the cave, so different from Krell warriors. They were small and soft, yes, but they moved with purpose and confidence. They spoke quietly to each other, sometimes laughing at private jokes. Hyunwoo noticed him awake and brought him more water and some food. It was human food, strange and bland to Thalrex's taste, but his body needed nutrition. He ate slowly, carefully. "How do you feel?" Hyunwoo asked. "Better," Thalrex admitted. "The pain is less. Good, the infection is clearing up. Your body is healing." Hyunwoo sat down beside him. "You fell during the storm, didn't you?" "Down a ravine?" Thalrex nodded, shame flooding through him. He had failed the trial. He had shown weakness. He had needed rescue. "That must have been scary," Hyunwoo said. Scary. Krell didn't admit to fear. Fear was weakness, and weakness was death. But sitting here in the cave, injured and dependent on the kindness of humans, Thalrex found he couldn't lie. "Yes," he whispered. "I was scared." Hyunwoo nodded like this was perfectly normal. Being scared is natural. It keeps us alive. The trick is not letting fear control us. He gestured to the cave around them. "You did well. You found shelter. You stayed alive long enough for help to arrive. That takes strength." Strength. The human was calling his survival strength, not weakness. It was a perspective Thalrex had never considered. Outside, the Krell searchlight swept closer. Time was running out for all of them. Morning came with golden light filtering into the cave. Thalrex woke to the smell of something cooking. Hyunwoo was heating food over the portable stove, and the aroma made the young Krell's stomach growl despite himself. "Hungry?" Hyunwoo asked with that strange human smile. "This is protein paste. Not delicious, but nutritious. Your body needs fuel to heal." Thalrex accepted the warm container. The food was indeed bland, but he was too hungry to care. He ate slowly, watching the humans move around the cave. They had been awake for hours, he realized, taking turns keeping watch, monitoring his condition, preparing supplies. They should have left him. That was the logical thing to do. Return to their base, report his location. Let the Krell handle their own affairs. Instead, they had stayed with him through the night. Two fragile beings protecting a member of a species that could tear them apart. It made no sense by Krell logic. But then, humans rarely made sense to the Krell. "We need to move you," Ji-won said, checking something on her datapad. "The search parties are close. They'll be here in a few hours." "I can walk," Thalrex said, though he wasn't sure if it was true. Hyunwoo shook his head. "Your leg is still healing, but we can support you if needed." He paused, studying the young Krell. Though there's another option. We could contact your people now. Tell them we found you. No. The word came out sharper than Thalrex intended. If you contact them, they will come with weapons. They will think you captured me. You will die before I can explain. Jiwon and Hyunwoo exchanged glances. The cub was probably right. The Krell weren't known for asking questions before shooting. Then we move, Jiwon decided. There's a small valley about 2 kilometers from here. Better cover, and it's outside the immediate search grid. We can set up a temporary camp there. The journey was slow and painful. Thalrex tried not to lean too heavily on Hyunwoo, but his injured leg couldn't support his full weight. The human was surprisingly strong for his size and patient, never complaining about the burden. They reached the valley by midday. It was a beautiful spot, hidden between 2 ridges with a small stream running through it. Hyunwoo helped Thalrex sit against a smooth rock, then immediately checked his injuries. The shoulder looks good. No new bleeding. The leg is holding up. He changed the bandages with practiced efficiency. You're healing faster than I expected. Krell physiology is impressive. We are bred for combat, Thalrex said automatically, repeating what his instructors had taught him. The weak die young. The strong survive. Is that what you believe? Jiwon asked, setting up a sunshade over him. That weakness deserves death? Thalrex hesitated. 3 days ago, he would have answered yes without thinking, but that was before he fell. Before he lay dying in a cave. Before 2 humans found him and chose kindness over logic. I don't know anymore, he admitted quietly. Hyunwoo sat down beside him. Strength comes in many forms. Physical power is just one kind. There's also the strength to show mercy. The strength to help someone who can't help themselves. The strength to do what's right even when it's dangerous. Like what you're doing now, Thalrex said. Helping me even though it puts you in danger. Exactly like that. They spent the afternoon in the valley. Jiwon worked on securing their position, setting up motion sensors and preparing the shuttle for a quick escape if needed. Hyunwoo tended to Thalrex's wounds and made sure he stayed hydrated. As evening approached, Hyunwoo started building a campfire. Not the portable heating unit they had used in the cave, but a real fire made from gathered wood and dried brush. What are you doing? Thalrex asked, fascinated. The Krell had abandoned such primitive practices thousands of years ago. Making a campfire. It's a human tradition. Hyunwoo arranged the wood carefully, then used a small tool to ignite it. Flames sprang up, crackling and warm. When we're far from home, when we're scared or lonely, we make fires. It reminds us that we're not alone, that we're part of something bigger. Thalrex stared at the flames. There was something hypnotic about them, something ancient and primal that spoke to a part of him he didn't know existed. As darkness fell, they sat around the fire. Jiwon shared her emergency rations and Hyunwoo told stories. Not grand tales of conquest and battle like the Krell told, but simple stories about human life, about growing up on Earth, about his first time seeing the stars from space, about the friends he had made and lost. Don't your people tell stories? Hyunwoo asked. We tell of victories, Thalrex said, of great warriors and famous battles, of enemies defeated and worlds conquered. But what about the small things, the everyday moments that make life worth living? Thalrex had no answer. The Krell didn't value such things. Small moments were insignificant. Only great deeds mattered. But sitting here by the fire, listening to Hyunwoo's gentle voice, watching the flames dance, Thalrex thought maybe the Krell were missing something important. Later, when Jiwon had gone to check the perimeter, Hyunwoo pulled out a small device. Music began to play, soft and melodic. It was nothing like the war drums and victory chants of the Krell. This was peaceful, almost sad. What is this? Thalrex asked. A song from my home. My grandmother used to sing it to me when I was young. Hyunwoo looked up at the stars. She died before I left Earth. I carry this recording to remember her. You grieve for her, Thalrex observed. Even though she was old and her death was natural. Of course. Death being natural doesn't make it hurt less. She was important to me. She taught me to be kind, to be curious, to see the beauty in small things. Hyunwoo smiled sadly. The Krell probably think that's weakness too. Mourning the dead. My people believe the dead are honored through the deeds of the living, Thalrex said. We carry their strength forward. That's not so different from what I do. I carry her kindness forward. I try to live the way she taught me. Hyunwoo looked at Thalrex. That's why I'm helping you. Not because you're a Krell or because there's some political advantage, but because she would have wanted me to. Because it's the right thing to do. Thalrex felt something strange in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. These humans confused him. They were weak by Krell standards, soft and vulnerable. But there was a kind of strength in them that he was only beginning to understand. That night, Thalrex had nightmares. He dreamed of falling, of the storm, of lying broken and alone in the cave. He woke with a gasp, his heart pounding, his claws extended. Hyunwoo was there immediately, placing a gentle hand on his uninjured shoulder. "It's okay. You're safe. Just a bad dream." "I dreamed of the fall," Thalrex admitted, shame flooding through him. Warriors didn't have nightmares. Warriors didn't need comfort. But Hyunwoo didn't mock him. He just sat beside him, quiet and present. That must have been terrifying. Falling in the dark, not knowing if you would survive. "I thought I was going to die," Thalrex whispered. "I thought I would die alone and no one would ever know what happened to me. But you didn't die. You survived, and you're not alone." Hyunwoo gestured to the fire, still burning low. "We're here, and tomorrow, when you're strong enough, we'll find your family. We'll make this right." "They won't understand," Thalrex said. "My father, the instructors, the other warriors. They'll see this as weakness. They'll see your help as contamination. Then we'll explain it to them. Help them understand." Hyunwoo added more wood to the fire. "Change is hard, but sometimes it's necessary." Thalrex lay back down, but sleep wouldn't come. He watched the fire, watched Hyunwoo keeping guard, watched the stars wheel overhead. His whole life he had been taught that the Krell were superior. That strength was everything. That other species, especially humans, were lesser beings. But lying here, healed by human medicine, protected by human kindness, he couldn't believe that anymore. The humans weren't lesser. They were just different. And maybe, just maybe, their difference made them stronger in ways the Krell had never considered. The next morning, Jiwon woke them with urgent news. "The search grid is closing in. We have maybe 6 hours before they're on top of us. Can we move again?" Hyunwoo asked. "We can try, but eventually they'll find us. It's just a matter of time." Jiwon looked at Thalrex. "We need to make a decision. Try to run or stay and face them." Thalrex tried to stand. His leg was stronger than yesterday, but still weak. He could walk with support, but running was impossible. "If you run, they will hunt you across the planet. My father doesn't give up easily." "Then we stay," Hyunwoo said firmly. "We did nothing wrong. We helped an injured child. We'll explain that and hope they understand." "And if they don't understand?" Jiwon asked. "If they attack, then we defend ourselves. But we don't shoot first. We give them a chance to see reason." Hyunwoo looked at Thalrex. "Will you speak for us? Tell them the truth about what happened." Thalrex nodded slowly. "I will try. But I am only a cub. They may not listen to me." "They'll listen," Jiwon said with more confidence than she felt, "because you're all we've got." They spent the remaining hours preparing, not for battle but for contact. They arranged the campsite to look peaceful, non-threatening. They made sure Thalrex was comfortable, and his injuries were clearly visible. They prepared their story simple and true. As the sun reached its peak, they heard it. The sound of Krell aircraft approaching, heavy, powerful, impossible to miss. "Here we go," Jiwon whispered. Thalrex looked at his 2 human protectors, these strange beings who had risked everything for him. "Thank you," he said. "For everything." Hyunwoo smiled. "Thank us when we're all still alive tomorrow." The aircraft appeared over the ridge, and with them came War Chief Draknor, ready to find his son. The Krell dropships descended like falling mountains. Their engines roared, kicking up dust and small stones. Thalrex felt the ground shake beneath him, a sensation he had grown up with but now found terrifying for entirely different reasons. Beside him, Jiwon and Hyunwoo stood their ground. They weren't armed beyond Jiwon's sidearm, which remained holstered. They had agreed not to draw weapons unless absolutely necessary. This needed to be a conversation, not a fight. The first dropship landed 50 meters away. Its ramp slammed down and Krell warriors emerged in perfect formation. They were huge, heavily armed, their scaled bodies covered in combat armor. Each one was a trained killer, and there were dozens of them. But it was the figure that emerged last that made Thalrex's breath catch. Draknor. His father was even larger than Thalrex remembered, his dark scales seeming to absorb the sunlight. He wore minimal armor, a sign of his confidence. A war chief didn't need protection. He was protection. Draknor's eyes swept the valley, taking in the scene instantly. The human shuttle. The two humans standing protectively near a small form. The campfire still smoldering, and then his eyes found Thalrex. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Father and son stared at each other across the dusty ground. Thalrex saw shock in his father's eyes, then relief, then something harder. Anger. Thalrex. Draknor's voice was like distant thunder. He started forward, and his warriors moved with him in perfect synchronization. Jiwan stepped forward slightly, placing herself between the approaching Krell and Thalrex. It was a symbolic gesture at best. If Draknor wanted to reach his son, nothing she could do would stop him. But the gesture was noted. War Chief Draknor, Jiwan said in carefully practiced Krell. Her accent was terrible, but the attempt at respect was clear. Your son is alive and recovering. We mean no harm. Draknor stopped 10 meters away. His warriors spread out, surrounding the campsite. More dropships were landing, disgorging additional troops. Within minutes, the small valley was filled with armed Krell. Velshara emerged from the second dropship. The instructor's face was unreadable, but her tail moved in agitation. She approached Draknor and spoke quietly. The humans have interfered with the trial. This is a violation of sacred law. I can see what they've done, Draknor growled. His eyes never left his son. The question is why? Hyunwoo spoke up, his voice steady despite the fear Thalrex could smell on him. Your son was dying. We found him in a cave, severely injured. We provided medical assistance. That's all? That's all? Velshara's voice was sharp. You contaminated a warrior trial. You touched a Krell cub with your soft hands. You filled his head with your weak philosophy. We saved his life, Jiwan said firmly. If that's contamination, then I'll happily plead guilty. Draknor moved forward again, ignoring the humans now. He approached his son, kneeling despite his size to examine Thalrex's injuries. His huge hands, capable of crushing steel, touched the bandages with surprising gentleness. Father, Thalrex said quietly, I fell during the storm. My beacon broke. I know. Draknor's voice was softer now for his son's ears only. Your instructors found the ravine, found the broken beacon. We thought... He didn't finish the sentence. Thalrex understood. They thought he was dead. The relief in his father's eyes was real, even if it was quickly being replaced by something more complicated. Draknor stood and turned to face the humans. You found my son. You treated his injuries. For this I am grateful. He paused, and the atmosphere grew heavy. But gratitude does not erase the violation. You interfered with a sacred trial. By our law, this cannot be ignored. Your law also speaks of honor, Hyunwoo said. He was trembling slightly, but his voice didn't waver. Of protecting the helpless. Of repaying life debts. We found an injured child and we helped him. If that's dishonorable in your culture, then your culture is wrong. The valley went silent. Several Krell warriors reached for their weapons. No one spoke to a war chief like that. No one criticized Krell culture and lived, but Draknor didn't order an attack. He studied Hyunwoo with new interest. You dare to lecture me about honor, human? You whose people abandoned honor for survival during the border wars. We didn't abandon honor. We chose a different kind of strength. Hyunwoo gestured to Thalrex. Strength that says protecting a child matters more than following tradition. Strength that says doing what's right is more important than doing what's expected. Velshara hissed, a sound of pure contempt. Human weakness disguised as philosophy. War Chief, the law is clear. They interfered. They must face consequences. What consequences? Thalrex spoke up, his young voice carrying across the valley. Every eye turned to him. Death? You would kill those who saved my life? The trial was sacred, Velshara said. If you could not survive it, then you were not meant to become a warrior. He's a child, Jiwan said, her voice tight with anger. A child who fell and got hurt. There's no honor in letting a child die just to maintain tradition. You don't understand our ways, Velshara replied. No, Hyunwoo agreed. We don't, but we understand compassion. We understand that life has value, regardless of strength or weakness. We understand that true power isn't about domination. It's about choosing to help when you could choose to walk away. Draknor raised a hand, silencing further debate. He walked to the remains of the campfire, studying it carefully. He looked at the medical supplies, neatly organized. He examined the shelter the humans had set up, designed to protect Thalrex from the sun. You stayed with him, Draknor said slowly. You didn't just treat his wounds and leave. You stayed. Of course we stayed, Hyunwoo said. He was hurt and alone. We couldn't just abandon him, why not? You owe us nothing. We are not allies, barely even friends. The peace between our peoples is fragile at best. Draknor turned to face them. You risked your lives, violated our law, potentially started a diplomatic incident. All for a child you didn't know, of a species you have reason to fear. Why? Jiwon met his gaze steadily. Because it was the right thing to do. Because we're human, and humans don't leave children to die. Not Krell children, not any children. It's who we are. Something shifted in Draknor's expression. Not agreement, not yet. But understanding, perhaps. Recognition. Father. Thalrex struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on his good leg. Hyunwoo moved to support him, but Thalrex waved him off. This was something he needed to do alone. The humans saved my life. By our oldest laws, I owe them a life debt. Velshara stepped forward. You are too young to declare such debts. You haven't even passed your trial. I survived the trial, Thalrex said firmly. I fell. I was injured. I found shelter. I stayed alive until help came. The trial doesn't say help must come from other Krell. The trial is meant to be faced alone, Velshara insisted. And he did face it alone, Hyunwoo interjected. For 4 days. By the time we found him, he had already survived the impossible. We just made sure he continued surviving. Draknor was silent for a long moment. His warriors waited, weapons ready, watching their war chief for orders. The humans stood their ground, unarmed but unafraid. Finally, Draknor spoke. Show me his injuries, all of them. Hyunwoo hesitated, then nodded. He helped Thalrex sit and carefully remove the bandages. The shoulder wound was still healing, red and raw, but clean. The leg showed signs of fracture, carefully splinted and wrapped. Draknor examined each injury in detail. Then he activated his datapad, pulling up medical scans his teams had taken when they found the ravine. The fall was 60 meters, he said quietly. The impact force should have killed him. That it didn't was luck. But the injuries, the infection... He looked at Hyunwoo. You're saying he would have died without treatment? Within hours, Hyunwoo confirmed. The infection was spreading rapidly. His body was shutting down from dehydration. We gave him antibiotics, fluids, wound care. Basic emergency medicine. Basic? Velshara scoffed. You used advanced human medical technology on a Krell trial candidate. You saved his life, Draknor interrupted. His voice was hard. That's what they did, Velshara. They saved my son's life when our search parties failed to find him, when our traditions would have let him die alone in that cave. He turned to his warriors. Bring up the medical records. I want every member of my command staff to see exactly how close we came to losing him. The records were displayed on portable screens. Thalrex watched as his father's warriors studied the data, their expressions changing as they understood the severity of the injuries. One of the warriors, an older veteran named Krath, spoke up. War Chief, the human is correct. The cub would not have survived another night without intervention. The infection alone would have killed him. Draknor nodded slowly. He looked at his son, really looked at him, seeing past the warrior he wanted Thalrex to become, and seeing the child he still was. My son owes you a life debt, he said to the humans. This is our oldest law, older even than the warrior trials. It cannot be dismissed. We don't want a debt, Jiwon said. We just want to know that he's okay, that he'll be allowed to go home, to heal properly. He will, Draknor promised. But a life debt is not a burden. It's a bond. It means that from this day forward you are under my family's protection. Any who harm you, harm us. Velshara looked shocked. War Chief, you can't possibly. I can. I have. The decision is made. Draknor's voice left no room for argument. These humans acted with honor, by their understanding and ours. They will be treated with respect. He extended his hand to Jiwon, a human gesture he had learned during the treaty negotiations. After a moment's hesitation, she took it. His huge hand completely engulfed hers, but his grip was careful. "Thank you," he said simply. "For my son." The Krell Council Chamber was a massive structure carved from black stone. It stood at the heart of their capital city on Krelos, the homeworld of the Dominion. Draknor had been to many council sessions in his long career, but this one felt different. This one could change everything. He stood in the center of the circular chamber, surrounded by the 12 council elders. Above them, observation galleries were filled with warriors, politicians, and interested parties from across the Dominion. And in a special section, connected via hologram, sat the human delegation. Jawan and Hyunwoo were there, along with Ambassador Taehyung from the Human Diplomatic Corps. "Let us begin," Elder Zormak said. His voice was ancient and heavy with authority. "War Chief Draknor, you have requested this emergency session. Speak." Draknor straightened. "Honored elders, I come before you regarding an incident on Vakros Prime. An incident that has revealed a weakness in our culture that must be addressed." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Admitting weakness was not something Krell did lightly, especially not in public. "During a warrior trial, my son Thalrex was severely injured. He fell during a storm, breaking his tracking beacon. Our search parties failed to locate him for 4 days. By the time we found him, he was being treated by humans from the survey station. Humans who violated the sacred trial," Elder Sharketh interjected. She was known as a hardliner, one who believed the Krell should never have made peace with the humans. Humans who contaminated a warrior candidate with their soft philosophy. "Humans who saved my son's life when we failed to find him," Draknor corrected firmly. "I have reviewed the medical records. Without their intervention, Thalrex would have died within hours. The infection would have killed him. Then he was not meant to survive the trial," another elder said. "The weak die so the strong can lead. This has always been our way." "Perhaps our way is flawed," Draknor said. The chamber erupted. Warriors shouted denials. Elders called for order. The noise was deafening. But Draknor stood silent and unmoved until the chaos subsided. "I loved my son before this incident," he continued. "I love him still. But I never truly understood what love meant until I thought I had lost him. Until I stood in that valley and saw him alive, bandaged and healing, protected by 2 humans who owed him nothing." He activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air above the chamber floor. The cave where Thalrex was found. The medical treatment. The campsite. The fire. These humans could have reported his location and left. They could have ignored him entirely. They could have used him as a hostage in negotiations. Instead, they stayed with him. They gave him medicine, food, water, comfort. They risked their own lives to protect a child of their former enemies. "They violated our laws," Sharketh insisted. "They violated a tradition," Draknor replied. "There is a difference. Our laws speak of honor, of protecting the helpless, of repaying debts. The humans acted according to these laws, even if they broke the tradition of the trial." Zormak raised a hand for silence. "War Chief, what exactly are you proposing?" "I propose that we examine our traditions with honest eyes. The warrior trials have value, yes. They teach survival, strength, determination, but they also teach that asking for help is weakness, that vulnerability is failure, that compassion is contamination." He paused, looking up at the observation galleries. "My son spent 2 days with those humans. In that time, he learned things our finest instructors never taught him. He learned that strength comes in many forms. That protection of the weak is not weakness itself, but the highest form of power. That cooperation can be more valuable than domination." A young warrior in the gallery stood up. "War Chief, are you saying we should abandon our warrior culture? Become soft like the humans?" "I'm saying we should learn from them," Draknor replied. "Not abandon our strength, but add to it. The humans are physically weaker than us, yes, but they survived a war with us. They held their ground. They earned our respect. How did such weak creatures accomplish this?" He gestured to the holographic images. "Look at how they treated my son. Gentle hands, yes, but those gentle hands set broken bones, fought infection, sustained life. That gentleness was applied with skill, knowledge, and determination. They chose to help when helping was dangerous. If that's weakness, then we need to redefine what strength means." Velshara stood in the observation gallery. She had been silent until now, but her voice carried clearly. "War Chief, I was there. I saw the scene. And I must admit, though it pains me, that the humans acted with honor. They could have fled when our ships appeared. They chose to stay and face judgment. That took courage. Sharketh narrowed her eyes. So we're to accept human interference in our culture? Allow them to dictate how we raise our young? No, Hyunwoo said from the holographic section. All eyes turned to him. We're not dictating anything. We're not asking you to change your culture. We're just asking you to consider that our way of doing things isn't weakness. It's different. And maybe, just maybe, there's room in this galaxy for different kinds of strength. Jiwon spoke up as well. The Krell are warriors, yes. Powerful, dangerous, respected. But warriors need more than battle skills. They need to understand when to fight and when to show mercy, when to dominate and when to protect. Your son understood this instinctively. That's why he accepted our help. And that's why I'm requesting this council authorize a cultural exchange program, Draknor said. Not to make us more human, but to learn from each other. To understand that our two species, so different in form and philosophy, might be stronger together than apart. Jormak leaned back in his seat. This is a significant proposal, War Chief. It would change centuries of tradition. I know, but I also know that cultures which refuse to change eventually die. We've been stagnant for too long, convinced of our superiority, dismissive of other ways. The war with the humans should have taught us that superiority is earned, not assumed. They fought us to a standstill with inferior physical strength. How? Because they had something we didn't. What? Jormak asked. Unity born of genuine cooperation, not forced dominance. Innovation driven by diverse perspectives. Resilience that comes from valuing every member of their society, not just the strongest. Draknor looked at his son, who sat in the gallery watching intently. Thalrex learned more about true strength in 2 days with those humans than in years of traditional training. I don't want that knowledge to be wasted. The elders conferred among themselves in low voices. Minutes passed. Finally, Zormak spoke. We will allow a cultural exchange program on a trial basis. Limited participation, carefully monitored. If it proves valuable, we can expand it. If it weakens our warriors, we end it immediately. He looked directly at Draknor. Your family will oversee this program. Success or failure will rest on your shoulders. I accept that responsibility, Draknor said. There is one more matter, Sharketh said. The humans who interfered with the trial. What is to be done with them? Nothing, Draknor replied. They acted with honor and are under my family's protection. Anyone who harms them will answer to me personally. Sharketh looked like she wanted to argue but thought better of it. One didn't challenge a war chief's declared protection lightly. Then this session is concluded, Zormak announced. We will reconvene in 1 month to review the initial results of the cultural exchange. The council chamber began to empty. Draknor made his way to where Thalrex waited. His son's injuries were healing well, though he still walked with a slight limp. Did I do the right thing? Draknor asked quietly. Yes, father, Thalrex replied. You did. 6 months later, the cultural exchange program was in full operation. Young Krell warriors visited human stations to learn about cooperation and innovation. Human scientists came to Krell worlds to study their remarkable physiology and military tactics. The results were better than anyone had hoped. Krell warriors who participated in the program showed improved teamwork and tactical flexibility. Human scientists gained insights that advanced their understanding of biology and combat medicine. More importantly, personal relationships were forming. Respect was growing. Thalrex became something of a symbol for the program. The Krell cub who had been saved by human kindness, who had learned that strength and compassion weren't opposites but complements. On this particular day, he was back on Vakros Prime at the human survey station. Jiwon had invited him to visit, and he had brought 2 of his younger siblings with him. Hyunwoo met them at the landing pad, his ever-present smile in place. Thalrex, good to see you.
And these must be your siblings. My sister Karsha and my brother Mekthar, Thalrex introduced them.
Both younglings stared at Hyunwoo with wide eyes, unsure what to make of the tall, thin human. Welcome, Hyunwoo said warmly. We've prepared something special for you. He led them to an area behind the main building where a traditional campfire had been set up. Real wood, real flames, just like that night in the valley. Karsha approached the fire cautiously. What is this? A human tradition, Thalrex explained, sitting down by the flames. When they're far from home, they build fires to remind themselves they're not alone, that they're part of something bigger. Hyunwoo brought food and drinks, settling down with them. As evening fell and stars began to appear, He started telling stories. Not just human stories this time, but ones from both cultures. Tales of courage and sacrifice, of friendship and discovery, of the small moments that make life meaningful. The young Krell listened, fascinated. This was so different from their usual education. No weapons drills, no combat simulations, no lectures on dominance and strength. Just stories and fire and companionship. "Why do you do this?" Mekthar asked. "Tell stories around fires?" "Because it reminds us of what matters," Hyunwoo replied. "Not conquest or power, but connection. We're all looking up at the same stars, wondering about our place in the universe. The fire helps us feel less alone." Thalrex looked up at those stars, thinking about how much had changed in 6 months. The galaxy seemed both larger and smaller than he had once believed. Larger because there was so much to learn, so many ways of being he had never considered. Smaller because the distance between species wasn't as vast as he had thought. Jiwon joined them, sitting down across from Thalrex. "Your father tells me you'll be starting advanced training soon." "Yes, but it will be different from the old trials. More focus on leadership and cooperation, less on individual dominance." Thalrex smiled, an expression he had learned from the humans. Some of the older instructors are not happy about the changes. "Change is always hard," Jiwon agreed. "But it's necessary. The galaxy is too complex for any one species to face alone. We need each other whether we like it or not." "I like it," Thalrex said simply. "The old ways made us strong, yes. But these new ways make us stronger. Not despite our differences, but because of them." Later, as the fire burned low and the young Krell prepared to leave, Hyunwoo pulled Thalrex aside. "I'm proud of you," he said, "for speaking up at the council, for believing that change was possible." "You saved my life," Thalrex replied. "I owed you that much." "You don't owe us anything. We helped you because it was right, not because we expected payment." "I know. That's what makes it matter." Thalrex looked back at his siblings, who were examining the fire with curious fascination. "They'll grow up in a different world than I did. One where asking for help isn't weakness, where compassion is valued alongside strength, where humans and Krell can sit around a fire and just be friends." "Is that what we are?" Hyunwoo asked with a smile. "Friends?" Thalrex considered this. In Krell language, there wasn't really a word for friend. They had allies, subordinates, rivals, family. But friend in the human sense was new. "Yes," he said finally. "We're friends." As their shuttle lifted off, Thalrex watched the survey station shrink below. He thought about that night in the valley when he had been injured and scared and 2 humans had chosen kindness over logic. That choice had changed everything. It had saved his life, yes. But more than that, it had opened his eyes to possibilities he had never imagined. It had shown him that the galaxy was bigger and more wonderful than Krell dogma had taught him. And it had taught him the most important lesson of all. True strength wasn't about being the most powerful or the most feared. True strength was about choosing to protect, to help, to care, even when it was difficult. Even when it was dangerous. The humans understood that instinctively. Maybe that's why they had survived so long despite being physically weaker than so many other species. Maybe that's why they had fought the Krell to a standstill. Maybe that's why they were, in their own way, the most formidable species in the galaxy. Not because they were the strongest, but because they were the kindest. And kindness, Thalrex was learning, was the most powerful force in the universe.